Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holtz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the table, from me, I'm staring at perfection.
Oh, no.
Welcome, Clay. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Eric. It's so good to see you and good to see, your office and HQ and the brand that you've built over the years. It's cool to see where all the magic happens.
Man, we go back, Jesus, got to be like 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this with somebody the other day. Sometimes some of my favorite people, I don't remember where I met them.
I'm pretty sure we met at Billy's retreat.
Was that the first time? Yeah. And it was here in Austin, right?
Well, yeah, Lake Travis or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Was that the first time we met?
I think so, yeah. And James Clear was there. And
that's right.
That was like right before he published Atomic Habits. So.
Yeah. I think so. We should take the credit for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he hasn't been replying to my emails since he blew up.
Been a little busy, yeah. I saw him in San Diego a couple of years ago. He was passing through for a speaking gig, so we did dinner. But yeah, James is a brilliant dude. That was super fun. That was also the first time I ever did anything because we brought in a Wim Hof instructor from Colorado. I mean, and then I remember the funny part was she's like, we're going to separate the deep breathing and the possibly fainting from the ice bath dunking. That was fun. That was a really good weekend.
Yeah. One of the things that I've found benefit in my career is going to retreats or essentially putting yourself around like-minded people who are doing similar things. A lot of those people who were at that event have been on this podcast. So Neville, Noah, you now, Alan Walton, I think was there.
Yep.
So it's like these relationships that you build and you maintain, and then you're able to kind of, continue those relationships and other avenues that you never expected. Like I never knew I was going to be doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Things just kind of pay off that way. So
for sure. I've always been a big fan of, the connections and community, and people use Twitter, for instance. You and I both love Twitter, and people think it's good for reach or marketing or getting your message out there. And to me, almost every social platform is better for things that are not what people think it's for. To me, Twitter is to meet and connect with the most interesting people. And I think that's how you and I use it. And it's fun to, be snarky or throw out things or be interesting or whatever. But to me, it's like the ultimate address book on the internet. And you can find anyone. You could search, even topics. You can search for who's talking about beards within 20 miles of Atlanta or whatever. It's just magical. And, I think every social platform is good for different things, but it's usually not what people think it's good for.
The way I look at various platforms is I used to be big on Reddit. And Reddit is you follow topics of interest, and then it's kind of anonymous within that. On Twitter, you follow people who talk about topics of interest,
right?
And then you kind of build your audience around there. And then you legit, if you do it enough, if you reply to enough of the same person over and over again, engage in their conversations, retweet them, you start to get to know them.
Yeah.
And you start to build those relationships. And I think, Twitter, I've said it on plenty of podcasts. So any regular listener to the show is going to know, you got to get on Twitter. You got to follow Clay, follow, the guests of the show, because it's just, especially in the D2C space. It's just a great little community.
Yeah. And when people talk about Twitter is this, or Twitter is loud, or Twitter's too political or whatever, I'm like, Twitter's, the radio would be loud too if you try to tune in all the stations at once. The ability to customize and follow and unfollow. And what I really love is Twitter lists, right? You can build a list. And if I want to build a Twitter list, let's say my main feed is, you and friends and DTC and e-commerce and different things. But if I wanted to build a Twitter list of just comedians and do Kevin Hart and Sarah Silverman or whatever, and then you check that list and it's just that thing. So it's kind of this beautifully customizable, the New York Times sort of radio dial that you can tune the signal to whatever you want it to be. And what I always find is people, the people that know and use Twitter love it. And then people that don't sort of get it, maybe they follow too many people or they follow the wrong people, and then they blame Twitter. I was like, just curate and prune your feeds just like you would anything else in your life.
Yeah. Well, I'll go on my bitching about like the explore section or like the kind of like the Twitter generated stuff.
Oh, sure.
Will get under my skin from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
Alan was telling me there's a Twitter bot, which is apparently an app that really allows you to curate and kind of screen content for better. So I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Is it Tweetbot maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah. I've used Tweetbot and TweetDeck, I think, are the two ones that handle lists the best. Yeah, and you can just kind of like swipe, and you can swipe between different Twitters, right? Like DTC, e-commerce, and then you can swipe to other topics. It's really interesting. They've done kind of a Reddit-ish sort of thing where you can now follow topics and it curates those keywords and things like that. But yeah, no, I just think it's like, don't use Twitter to blast your marketing message out and maximize impressions. Use Twitter to find and connect with the most interesting people on the internet in an authentic way.
Yeah. Have conversations, like be real. Beard brand is a little more like shout out to the world kind of strategy, which is, not ideal, but it's the low priority, It's like of all the things we work on, that's just kind of how you set it up on autopilot. It doesn't work the same way as like Wendy's. Yeah. That's like memeing and, like in the moment, and like when something's hitting, like you've got to respond to it on the fly. Or if like, Joe Rogan posts something crazy, then you reply to that with something witty, and it just allows you to blow up. So if you ever want to kind of like hack Twitter, those are kind of the ways to do it, is like engage with remarkable accounts with interesting replies.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking, I work with a startup here in town called Zion. They're trying to build a decentralized, essentially like a social network built on Bitcoin. And one of the things we were talking about yesterday is memes or meme lord or whatever is now a job description. Like you can be hired if you're good at what you're saying, like being in the flow, understanding context, understanding culture, and being able to, create memes and relevant content of the moment. It's an actual job description, right? Yeah. You can get hired if you're really good at memes. Meme lord is the new director of marketing.
I mean, I think like Elon Musk, to me, like I'm a total Elon fanboy, and I know he comes with controversy to a lot of people out there, but I think he's like, meme lord number one.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Obviously, I think he's probably snaking some content and just reposting it, but it's just completely random too.
Yeah.
Like, but he kind of like, I feel like because he's built such an audience, 50 million followers or whatever, like he's able to quote unquote like break the internet with his kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you and I have talked about before is when people do marketing, I feel like the biggest pain that I see in marketing with brands and clients and stuff is not understanding that there's two kinds of marketing and they're almost nothing like each other. There's, brand marketing, which is what you're talking about, Elon, even using his personal brand. And, I'm always fascinated when people don't know that Tesla doesn't really do traditional marketing. You can't get on Tesla's email list and fall into their email sequence and drip, and they don't do retargeting because they don't do advertising. And you've never seen a Tesla billboard. And I'm a huge fan of the brand as well. And it's such a fun example because they built the brand, obviously starting with Elon's personal brand, but then they do brand things like launching a car into space with a spaceman driving in and taking pictures of it and getting coverage everywhere, right? And then, back to the old Seth Godin Purple Cow, like building a product that's remarkable that people talk about in ludicrous mode and just doing things that no other car company has ever done. Like, wait, I can go to bed at night, Tesla pushes an over-the-air update, and I wake up and my car has more horsepower. Like
it's
that,
faster.
We're in this world, and that still blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, you upgraded my car over. Like, he does so many things to make us feel like we're living in the future, but it's all, when I talk to marketers, I was like, there is no Tesla email list. Like they don't have. If you buy a car, then you get emails from Tesla. And so when companies want to do marketing better, the first thing I talk about is like, think about what is brand and what does investment in brand look like, and then what is your direct marketing and what does investment in that look like, and where should the dial? But understanding that typically when you invest in one, it's almost at the cost of the other, and you kind of have to choose.
Yeah. I like to re-echo because like a lot of the haters will say, like Tesla doesn't do any advertising, and it would imply they don't do any marketing. They certainly do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lot of marketing.
Brand marketing. They're one of the best at brand marketing for sure.
I think that's another interesting thing because just yesterday I called up our ad agency guy and we cut our Facebook ads. Like we're just done with it. We're losing money hand over fist. It's not working for us. And when you do something like that, it forces you to like, all right, well, how are we going to communicate our brand and get out there and spread the word? And, what avenues are there? Like, what kind of things can you do?
Mm-hmm.
So like the traditional ones, we were just at a conference on Wednesday, Conversion XL.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the questions I asked at one of my roundtables is just like, what are some not talked about marketing channels out there?
Sure.
I think someone mentioned SiriusXM worked pretty well for them. Direct mail, which I think people have forgotten about direct mail.
Yeah. Well, and you're good at creative and you're good at messaging and being human. And I've seen your guys, your print pieces that you include in some of the products and stuff like that. The ability to tell stories, I think, because you understand humans, you're going to be better at every channel. And then zigging when they zag, like direct mail. I would love to get a direct mail piece from Beard Brand. I mean, I know the brand, but for, prospecting and new people as well, your thing is going to be better than the guy who's trying to improve your window shades flyer is going to look like every other guy's improve your window shades flyer. And you're good at that creative because you understand people.
I guess I feel fortunate to have been put on some list. Somebody said like
some lists are good to be on, some lists are bad.
Yeah. Well, the list I'm on is like, like I get a Todd Snyder's magazine.
Okay.
I don't know if you get that or not. It's like a men's fashion brand. And then I'm a Tracksmith customer, and their magazine they send out is just beautiful. And Roca, I'm a customer of Roca. They sent out a magazine recently. They're here in Austin, Texas. And so I've seen a lot of really like the lifestyle forward, the brand forward companies invest in direct mail. And I even talked to a guy where that was a big customer acquisition channel for him. Yeah. Driving like $5 million a year.
Wow.
Of revenue just through direct mail. And it was like 80% of his business.
Yeah.
And you got to imagine like, when I'm on Twitter, you can scroll for 5 minutes and run into 10 of my competitors.
Right.
But in direct mail, there's literally no one. It's just kind of like a blue ocean, I think.
And it's easy to stand out because the people doing direct mail currently are, the people trying to fit in the coupon, the value pack, the mini blinds, window shades, whatever, vinyl siding kind of thing. And so when you send out a Beard Brand piece that looks gorgeous and it has great copy and it's interesting, you automatically stand out in that channel. Like you said, in a way that, I mean, you're very good at Twitter, but you're right, your tweet is going to be formatted and shaped like everything else. So you either have to be really good at the meme or the content or jumping on that. But I think you're right. The physical inbox is an interesting way to stand out.
Yeah. Well, I introduced you as the perfection here. Like I don't think we've even talked about like what you do and who you are. Like, what's your story or your 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because one of the main things I do is destroy the elevator pitch and I realize it's more colloquially used here, but nobody ever wants to be pitched in an elevator, right? None of us are ever going to be in an elevator with Steve Jobs ever again, right? The sort of legend of the elevator pitch, but
he is dead, by the way.
He is dead. Yeah, that's why nobody's going to be in an elevator with him. Like the story, like why elevator pitch, why is it called that? And the theory was someday you're going to step on an elevator with either Steve Jobs or Richard Branson or somebody. They're going to hit the 68th floor and you better be able to pitch and close your business to them by the time the doors open. And that it's interesting and it's stuck around because it's an interesting hook and repeatable and portable, but it never happens and nobody wants to be pitched. The goal is to have, like we're having now, an interesting human conversation. So one of the main things I do is teach companies and brands and entrepreneurs and employees of those companies how to better answer that question. So what do you do? Because a lot of people do incredible, amazing work. And then when they're asked, so what do you do? They give a version of that answer that doesn't reflect the interesting, amazing work that they do. And it all started with, it was 2013. I was living in New York City at the time. And a friend told me about a conference in San Diego. And I had lived in San Diego before, and I was trying to get back there again, so I didn't twist my arm to get to San Diego. And they said, the speakers will be amazing, the attendees will be amazing. I was like, cool, I'm sold. Bought a ticket, I went, and got there a little bit late. I usually like to sit in the front row in the conference as a forcing function to pay attention and not be on my phone. But I got there a little bit late and hadn't had coffee, so I sat in the back. And the first speaker was amazing, and afterwards they said, turn around, meet the person behind you. So I turned, and the guy said, so what's your name? What do you do? That question, like, so what do you do? And I, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was my lack of coffee or just that we're not good at answering that question, but I rambled on and on. I think I told him I was from Wisconsin. I'm a Packer fan and this and that. Every city I ever lived in and favorite flavors of ice cream. And so after rambling for a few minutes to stop myself, I was like, so what's your name? What do you do? And he was just the coolest guy. He was just as cool as Clooney. And he's like, oh, my name's Matt, and I run a little software company. And I was like, that's cool. I'm into software. I'm rambling again. I'm like, I'm into startups. What's it called? Maybe I've heard of it. And then he goes, it's called Automatic. And in that moment, I realized who I was talking to, because I knew who Matt Mullenweg was, but his hair was wet that morning and he had, a different jacket on. I didn't recognize him immediately. And it just blew the brain off the top of my head, because I realized I just completely blew my introduction to the guy who invented the software that powers 26% of the internet. Like an internet hero, right? Not like a Michael Jordan poster on my bedroom wall kind of hero, but maybe I should have had a poster of Matt on my wall, and then I would know what he looked like. So I totally blew that introduction.
And for those who don't know, Automatic owns WordPress.
Right.
And hopefully you know what WordPress is if you're listening to an e-commerce conversation.
Right. Yeah, so Matt founded Automatic, parent company WordPress, powers a quarter of the internet, and I knew who he was and completely blew my introduction. So I walked away from that interaction thinking like, okay, what's going on here? I skipped the next speaker, just kind of walked around the grounds, like pounding my forehead like Chris Farley. Like, it's so stupid. Why did you do that? And then I kind of became fascinated around how we introduce ourselves, not just the question, so what do you do? But it usually starts there. And then how do we better tell the story of the work that we do? And I've always been fascinated with, positioning, marketing, messaging, words, etc. But what I realized is this is the sort of first impression commercial. It happens about 3 times a day. So 1,000 times a year in some form or another, we interact with new people, and usually they ask you some version of, so what do you do? Just like you did. And we usually have a pretty terrible answer. So ever since 2013, I've been helping people improve the way that they answer that question by making it not about them, but about the people that they help, and by not listing a list of bullet points like a resume of what they do or what they've accomplished or whatever, but by making it about their customer, telling the story of their customer, right? We all know what a case study is, but I call it a case story, because if I ask you what you do and you come up with a clever intro, you actually want the person to say, what do you mean? You don't necessarily want it to be perfectly clear or complete, because it's boring. It tends to be boring. But if I say, that's interesting, what do you mean by that? Or what do you do? And then you walk me through the story of a beard brand client who maybe he didn't think he could grow a beard, or maybe he just wanted to upgrade his whole life and his fashion and his style, and his beard was part of it. And then you tell me about this guy named James, and you take me through the story. If I get enthralled with that story, and then at the end you just say it with your calm confidence, so that's what we do. I'm like, oh, and within 2 minutes I understand the brand of Beard Brand better than I would if you listed out, well, we have beard oils and we have this gold line and this silver line and these products, right? So it's been fun to do that, because it's a very repeatable process, but also different for every brand. Everyone we talk to does it differently.
I think, kind of what's interesting about the 30-second pitch is like, I've been meeting people for like my whole adult career. Like, it's just, networking's been in my blood for a while.
Yeah.
And in the early days, with Beard Brand and growing it, the excitement, launching, and, all the things that you're doing and changing the way society views beardsmen. And,
Yeah.
But now it's kind of gotten to this point where I feel like I identify more with Matt of Automatic, where it's just like, I run a small little software company.
Right.
It's kind of like this humble, and then if you haven't heard of me, no big deal, because it doesn't ultimately really make a big effect, whether or not you know who Automatic is or not, because he runs 26% of the web.
Yeah.
So I think like there's that kind of cool little like, oh yeah, this is what I do. If you've heard of us, cool. If you haven't, cool.
Right.
But I don't know like when that happens, or if that should be a strategy, or if I should just stick to my like always be pitching Beard Brand and telling that story.
So I think there's a happy medium between the two, which is, what's one of your favorite customer stories? Right? You guys have so many of thousands, and you document them well and you tell them well. But what's one? It doesn't even have to. It's obviously usually not the biggest revenue customer or whatever. It's the change that your brand helped enable in their life. And what's cool about doing this is every employee in the company can have a different customer case story, a different favorite customer of their transformation, or by discovering Tree Ranger, it helped him get the date, and now he's married to that girl and they have 2 kids and whatever.
Right.
Like that, if it's fun to tell that story, you can do your humble thing where Matt's like, oh, just a humble guy, I run a little software company, right? That's cool. And the point is, it's not about you. It's not about pounding your chest and everything else. but what's the perfect intro that helps you tell the story of Jeff or whoever your favorite customer is? And so the basic formula is, if you're talking about the company, we help people. And then what I like is, what do you help them do or achieve or become? So not the products, not the combs and the beards, but what do you help them do or achieve or become? And if you can frame that in this little sort of copywriting hack I like called verb your noun. So I used to do a lot with crowdfunding and Kickstarter. So I used to say, I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. So that's this kind of like Goldilocks. I never said I'm a Kickstarter strategist. I would never say I'm an Indiegogo expert, right? Mm-hmm. I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. The cool thing about that is if you frame the last part in verb their noun, you can flip the there to a your, and you have a pretty darn good website headline, campaign headline, whatever, fund your dream. If you're someone who wants to get your Kickstarter project funded, that's a compelling thing. So like we help usually men. I assume almost all your customers are
Well,
men.
Ours is we make men awesome.
We make men awesome. That's perfect. That's great. And then someone says, like, if we're on a plane, we've never met, what do you do? Like, we make men awesome. What do you mean, or how do you do that? Now, the typical response is most people say, well, we have a line of products and services that make men more confident, and that's fine, and that's one way to do it. But the hook that I teach is, at that point when they go, well, what do you mean? Or how do you make men awesome? It doesn't matter what my question is. Your answer is, well, let me tell you a story. Yeah.
Story that comes up.
It's fun.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm going to integrate that. During our conference, I was thinking about, like, one of the things I want to do on our homepage is, like, we make men awesome, and here's how: our community, our content, and our products, like those three core things, and then like let them explore. But I think like telling the story around each of those, kind of things is a much better way of like, really building a connection to the brand. Yeah. Because like everyone out there has got the best products with the best features. And, right. Using all the finest ingredients or whatever. Yeah. So,
I mean, Nathan and ConvertKit, I think they do a pretty good job of this, of, the email provider for creators and makers and bloggers and things like that. And they do a good job of highlighting their creators. They celebrate creators throughout their marketing and tell the stories of the creators. And of course, because it's brought to you by ConvertKit, you're like, yeah, of course that creator uses ConvertKit, but it's not, they don't say, ooh, our visual builder changes the world. They'll be like, no, we the biggest champion for creators. And I think you guys do a great job of like being champion for men being awesome, like you said.
Yeah. I think it's challenging as you scale to maintain that, especially in today's environment with, half teams working remote and just like not having your fingers on every single piece of content that goes out, every single blog article, every single email, every single like social media interaction or customer service interaction. Do you have any kind of guidance on how to help people essentially maintain that consistency across the whole brand?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and you're 100% right. It is challenging as it scales. I think just developing whatever sort of simple kind of template or format you use to tell your customers' stories, and then I think the key is enabling everyone to have that story radar on and listen for it and ask your customers, email them. We would love to, feature you or hear your story, or how did you hear, because you get interesting customer data too. But I like to think of it in terms of like going from zero to sort of the MVP of customer stories, as if every employee in your company has the ability to tell a great story about your customer, and ideally their own, right? Somebody they interacted with, or you have this awesome barbershop up here, they cut their hair and then they were introduced to this, and they're just like, the cool thing is we make men awesome. How are all the interesting ways that you made men awesome? This guy didn't realize he could have a great beard, and then he did, and then he upgraded his style, and then he got married, or, whatever, all the different ways. Yeah. It could just be confidence. It could be whatever. And the cool thing is, I mean, you're very good at branding and consistency with your products and stuff. I think you just do that and then find the interesting, find the stories. And like when I look at beer brand, I want to hear more about your customer stories, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I got plenty of them.
I know. You guys have a vault of them. Yeah. You guys have tons of them.
What do you think is the direction that like e-commerce is going to move into as it continues to get more competitive and, as brands try to stand out? Like, how do they leverage technology or, the various platforms to stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, I think technology-wise and tool and tactic-wise, I mean, you're seeing everything shift all the time. I'm hearing interesting things about, brands that you might not assume would succeed big on TikTok, being interesting on TikTok, like finding ways to use where some of the new, some of the eyeballs are and stuff. But I'm always a huge fan. We talked earlier about brand versus direct, and I think brand people should get better at direct, and direct people should get better at brand. And most people in direct to consumer call themselves brand, right? It's in your guy's name. But a lot of direct to consumer brands are focused too much on the direct part and not enough on the brand part. A brand that I think you and I both love, Yeti here in Austin. Yeti charges $300 for a cooler. Maybe it's even more now. And 10 years ago, if you and I went camping, which was possible 10 years ago, we would have bought Coleman, the brand name. The 5-day Extreme Coleman that keeps the ice cold for 5 days was $33 at Walmart. So a Yeti is a better cooler, 100%. Let's say it's a 300% better cooler. It's 3 times as good. So if Yeti was selling a cooler, it would cost $100 because 3 times 33. It costs $300. So what makes up that additional $200? And its story, its identity, its masculinity, it's the ability that if you and I buy a Yeti and Billy Murphy doesn't, and he's got his baby blue Coleman, we could say, oh, nice Coleman Murphy. Like that, the ability to say that and in that moment give a friend a hard time and have higher status for a second, all those things added up is what makes up the other $200. So I call this story math. Like you just think about the price of your product and think about what are you actually charging for the product and what are you charging for the story. It's not perfect down to the ROAS level, but it's a way to quantify the story of the brand and what people are actually buying. So another example that we all know is when you see a Super Bowl ad for a truck, and it doesn't even really matter if it's Ford or Chevy or Dodge or whatever, they do something that nobody ever does when they buy a new truck. They drop concrete or iron I-beams in steel I-beams into the bed of the truck, usually from 20 feet, right? They could set it down calmly, but that's not masculine enough. They say, banholes, let it go. And they break, the chain pops and the concrete drops and you see the shocks. Nobody ever does that. Nobody ever buys a $90,000 Ford F-150 and then drives it over to have you drop concrete in it from 20 feet. So what's going on there? They're selling a truck, but they're selling also identity and a more masculine vibe to an accountant or a brand marketing guy who maybe drives to the office and wants to feel like maybe he's like the guy who drops the concrete, but nobody drops the concrete. And so like, that's kind of how I look at the world. And you're way smarter than I am as far as all the, the pixels and the retargeting, and we invest in ROAS and everything else. I think the other half of the coin is figuring out what's the brand, what's the story. I think it's about figuring out the stories, products and services that help your customers feel the way they want to feel when they buy it, when they use it, and when they recommend it, which are 3 sort of different things, right? Buying it and using it is a more independent thing, but what's the trigger point? What's the portable story? We talked about our friend James Clear. If I was to write a clickbaity headline, I'd say James Clear didn't sell 10 million books. He sold 1 million books to his list, but he built a book with portable stories and hooks like we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. That hook made each book that he sold sell 6 more books or 10 more books. So of course James sold 10 million books, but not 1-to-1, not James to customer. He sold 1 million books, but he wrote a book where each one sells 10 more. And that's the opportunity, I think, for a lot of brands in the space, in the DTC spaces. And you and I have talked about some of our favorites and the ones that are interesting in building these hooks in. But I think a lot of DTC founders go to work every day thinking about spreadsheets and funnels and email lists and retargeting and pixels, and not enough about should we be dropping concrete in the back of our trucks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people learn more of these insights from you?
I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. Clay, the last name is not phonetic. It's Hebert, but pronounced Hebert. So only people in New Orleans or Montreal know how to pronounce it. But A like the letter, bear like the animal. And just my website, clayhebert.com.
There you go, clayhebert.com. Well, man, I appreciate you coming by. This is flown by. I bet you talk for another 2 hours.
Feels like 30 seconds. We'll do a Rogan length version sometime.
Yeah, that will be off air. You guys don't get to hear the best podcasts, which continue to happen before and after the event. So maybe if you ever meet me at one of these Conversion XLs, we can extend these conversations. Clay, perfection, the perfect podcast just happened. That was it. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers and keep on growing.